Israel National Radio presents the Jewish Home and Family Show with marriage and family therapist Leora Mandel.
I'd like to welcome a special guest to the Jewish Home and Family Show. Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, also known as the Relationship Rabbi, is a licensed professional counselor and is also a certified Imago relationship therapist. He locally services the Baltimore area but is also available for online international counseling and offers workshops. He's the author of the book, The Jewish Marriage Book, which is focusing on Imago relationship therapy, and another book entitled Is My Marriage Over? The 5-Step Action Plan to Saving Your Marriage. Normally when we do interviews, we just have a one-segment interview, but because Rabbi Slatkin is so multifaceted, I decided this week it would be very interesting to have two focuses. So during the first segment of our show, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin to explain to us what Imago therapy is. And during the second half of the show, please stay tuned where we'll hear more about Rabbi Slatkin, the Relationship Rabbi's 5-Step Action Plan to Saving Your Marriage. Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, welcome to the Jewish Home and Family Show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
I'd like to start by asking you, what is Imago therapy? Most people, I don't know if everyone's heard about it, and even those who have might not be quite sure what it is that's so specific about Imago that's different than regular marital therapy.
Sure. So Imago therapy, and we pronounce it correctly, a lot of people mispronounce it, and I think it's maybe a Japanese word. Imago is actually Latin for image, and the Imago has its own theory of why couples choose who they do, and part of it is they posit that we have an unconscious image of the type of person we want to marry, and it's got to be someone that's going to bring up some of the very familiar characteristics that we're used to and very familiar memories. So, although people don't like to hear that you marry your mother or your father, well, you literally don't do that, but you're going to be attracted to someone who's going to make you feel familiar, and the purpose of that is to be able to facilitate the growth, because we all have unmet needs growing up. We all, as a parent, we do the best we can for our children, but there's always certain things that we feel that we could have gotten more of, and when we go back to the same exact situation, so to speak, and have to redo it over again and respond differently, we can actually heal from some of those experiences that weren't always so comfortable for us growing up.
So it sounds like the foundation of this therapy is really about choosing a spouse that can facilitate a sort of healing process. Is that right?
Right. That's the theory behind it. Now, there are some people who are a little bit uneasy about dealing with childhood, and even without focusing on that, the therapy itself is very helpful, and because it teaches couples how to be safe and how a really specific, structured way of being in a relationship and connecting with each other.
And if you could give us some background, how did this whole theory develop in terms of the theory and then the practice of actually helping couples?
Sure. Well, about 30 years ago, Dr. Harlow Hendricks, he was teaching a class in marriage therapy at a university in Texas, and he had just received divorce papers from his wife. And he was thinking, how can I be teaching a class about marriages and how to make relationships work when I can't even do it myself? So he decided he was going to make it his mission to try to figure out what makes marriages work, what makes a successful relationship. So he did that, and he did a lot of research, and he really combined the best from various fields of psychology. So it's a more eclectic approach. And he came up with a theory that he thought really was dead on, and he tested it, and he created a workshop, which we have, it's called the Getting the Love You Want workshop, and that's based on the book of the same title, Getting the Love You Want, which is a New York Times bestseller, and that's really where Imago came from. And then he started training other therapists and started practicing and working with couples together. And Imago's been around for about 30 years, and there's therapists throughout the world, and even in Israel there are Imago therapists, and it's a very profound form of relationship therapy.
Now, not everyone's familiar, especially if you're not a marriage therapist yourself, how many different types of marital therapy are out there. But even without people really fully understanding what the options are, how would you say Imago therapy is unique in the world of marital therapy or different than other options in terms of theories of marital therapy?
Well, Imago is different because it really focuses on the couple and the relationship. So, for example, if you're going to a doctor, a medical doctor, so in Western medicine, we traditionally focus on the symptoms. So, if you have a cut, or if you have a cold, so we'll give you medicine for the cold. And we treat the symptoms, but we don't look to see if it's something chronic necessarily or if there's a deeper root for the issue. In Imago, we're treating it more in a holistic way. More similar to maybe some, if you're familiar with Eastern types of medicine. We're looking at the root cause. We're not just treating the symptoms, but we're looking at the root. So we're coming with a deeper perspective. So in that sense, it's different because it's not just focused on changing the behaviors, but about understanding and developing insight. And the second is that the therapist, unlike the doctor who is the expert, the therapist serves as more like the facilitator. The couple is really the expert because the couple knows the relationship better than anyone. And the focus is on the couple relating with each other. So when I work with a couple, I have the couple face each other, and instead of talking to me about each other, they're talking to each other. And the beauty of that is not only does it take away a lot of the he said, she said, which happens in a lot of therapy, and takes away a lot of the blaming that can go on, it actually forces the couple to really face each other and work on a relationship together and to take dual responsibility of the relationship that they want to create. So I found that I help couples find out, explore what's going on in a relationship, and really come to the conclusion solutions together. So instead of me telling them what to do and making decisions for a couple, which really aren't going to affect me once they leave the room, they're the ones who are going to have to live with the decision. So I'll have them decide for themselves how they want their relationship to move. And for example, if we're talking about an issue, instead of me giving my input, I have them really learn how to talk about it together so that they can come to a solution together. And that's the solution that they're going to live with and going to be happy with. So in other therapy, the therapist serves as a mediator, trying to bargain. Sometimes, unfortunately, the therapist takes sides. My job is to be neutral and to create a safe space for the couple so that they can learn how to connect in a different way and a more meaningful and productive way.
And what really makes sense about that is that once they leave the therapy room, hopefully they're not in therapy for a lifetime, they're going to have to learn these skills on their own. So to actually start learning the skills with the therapist there, but then being able to take it home and hopefully at a certain point not need the therapist is really important. About how many sessions is Imago therapy considered long-term therapy, short-term therapy? What could people expect in terms of how long they'd be coming for therapy?
So, I would consider it short-term therapy in the sense that I'm not going to have couples coming for some types of therapy, especially individual therapy, psychoanalysis. You have a person coming for 3-5 years, maybe even longer. But it's not a quick fix either. And it really depends on each couple. I usually recommend 12 sessions, 12 weekly sessions, because it takes time to learn the skill. Because basically, couples learn the skill of how to communicate and be in a relationship with each other. And just like learning how to ride a bike, it feels awkward at first, but it takes practice. Once couples practice it, then they're able to do it on their own. And I have couples that have come longer, couples that come back when it is a really explosive issue that they feel like they can't handle on their own. They'll come in, they'll pop in for a session, but it's not meant to keep them forever. I'm really there to empower the couple, and I want them to inspire me. I want them to be able to move on and be able to be self-sufficient. That's really my goal.
And a question for you, Rabbi. What was it specifically that led you to specialize in Imago therapy as opposed to any other type of marital therapy?
So what led me to Imago is actually my own relationship. After my first child was born, we were undergoing, Alexa and I had a little bit of a, just typical young couple stress. And we really were both always looking to grow, and we wanted to learn to see if we could get some assistance. And a friend of ours recommended Imago, and we didn't really know much about it. I heard about it in school. I was in went in one ear and out the other. So we went to this therapist, and we were blown away. After the first session, we felt like we were reconnected to, it's like we were newlyweds again. And it's really struck me because after experiencing other types of therapy, not marriage counseling, but I never really thought that they were so effective. And of course, it's partially the therapist and partially the methodology. But this therapy, I thought, instantly made a difference because it's not just like going somewhere and talking about the problem and having homework to deal with it. The problem is the relationship, and you're actually working on the relationship in real time in the session, so that, and as a therapist, it gives me lots of, gratification to see a couple behaving and relating to each other in a healthy, different way, and seeing how happy they are when they walk out of the session. So it's not that it's an instant change, but the way of relating to each other is different. So that's how I got to it. I really believe that it was so helpful for my wife and I. We both believed that. And at the time, I was in the counseling program, and the therapist suggested that, why don't you do the Imago training? This would be great for you, and especially in your community. And I said, definitely. So I did the training, and,
here you are today. Are there any common themes that you see in couples, especially through the Imago lens, that might be helpful for listeners to sort of hear they're not alone in this, and this is actually something that might be common among couples that Imago deals with?
Sure. I think all couples, there are general issues that all couples deal with, whether it's money, in-laws, intimacy. These are issues that are common for all couples, but especially in Imago, we're looking at the bigger picture. So instead of looking in the details, so we're looking at the relational patterns. We're looking at one spouse might withdraw, the other spouse might be more of a maximize your energy and make a big deal about issues and kind of nag the other person. Another thing that we see with couples a lot is the feeling of not being safe, not being able to communicate, not feeling heard. It's very common. Feeling misunderstood, feeling unappreciated. These are things that a lot of us feel in our relationships, and I would say probably most people feel that at some time or another. So, I'm never really daunted by an issue. I have a couple calls me, and sometimes I get some really, really difficult stories and situations, and it's easy to get caught up in the actual story that they're telling me. But ultimately, once the couples learn how to be safe and connect with each other, all of the particular issues that they're having are really not the most important thing, because really what we want is connection. We want to be connected with our spouse. We don't want to hurt them, but we really don't know how to go about dealing with it in a healthy way.
So is that really the foundation then of Imago therapy, learning how to safely connect to your spouse?
Yeah, being in a relationship in a whole new way and doing that through creating safety.
That's very interesting. If you don't mind, you wrote a book called The Jewish Marriage Book, Imago Relationship Therapy. If you could tell us a little bit about that book and also how the Jewish part of Imago therapy comes in, how they work together.
Sure. So the Jewish Marriage Book, there's two parts to the book. The first part is explaining some of the general ideas of how Imago works. I don't get so much into the actual theory about why we choose our partner, but more focusing on the process in creating safety. And then the second half, which is the majority of the book, really goes through all the Yom Tovim, and every Yom Tov there's a different lesson, a Torah lesson, which I've been able to connect with some of the work that I do with couples. So the goal is that couples can read the book, can learn that particular piece, and understand, be able to connect with these relational principles through the lens of the Torah, because that's being that's more familiar for the Jewish couples. It grounds it in our tradition and makes it really make sense. And that's really one of the reasons, besides the fact that I thought that Imago worked, one of the reasons why I felt so strongly about it is that I felt that on a spiritual level that it made so much sense. It made sense in terms of how we view a couple, how we view conflict, that really we're trying to connect. I liken it to the Maharal explains that everything is returning to its root, to its shorish. So, for example, the Jewish people they have a longing. Their root is in Eretz Yisrael. So our desire, the root of our neshama desire is to be in Eretz Yisraal. That's the dream we've had for so many years, and Baruch Hashem was able to do that now. So that's what Geula is about. So similarly, when a couple comes into the world, and we know that Zohar explains that a couple is really one soul is split for two different bodies, we're trying to return to our roots. We long for that connection. And these ideas about connection and that a couple really wants to connect, and sometimes there's things that get in the way that block that connection. And that's the conflict. And trying to figure out how we can take the conflict and use that to understand, what the real goal is, which is the connection. So it relates so much in my mind to these ideas of Galus, Geula, Truma, really connecting to the root, connecting to ourselves, and the sense of healing that happens in the conflict. So I found that it made so much sense for me from a Torah perspective that that's why I put this book, Jewish Marriage Book, and I also worked with Harlow Hendricks to put together a course for Jewish couples. It's called Couplehood as a Spiritual Path. And they made it for non-Jewish couples, but they want a Jewish version. So what we did is we took the same concepts and exercises, but we put Jewish text there to serve as support to some of the principles. But really, to me, it feels like very much strongly connected.
And how can people get the Jewish Marriage Book and the Imago Relationship Therapy?
The Jewish Marriage Book, they can go to my website, therelationshiprabbi.com, and if they can go in the nav bar, it says free Imago Marriage Help Book. If they click there, they can sign up and they can get a free download. If they're interested in ordering a hard copy, they can go on Amazon. And just to make sure, there is an older version that must be out, but the new version has a picture of it looks like a ring, a ring that looks like a clock.
So you're offering really this as a free service when you're talking about a free download that people can actually even access for free.
Yeah, I really feel that it's important to get this material out there. There's so many people suffering needlessly, and the more people that can read this book or Imago or anything that's helpful for them, the better. Because not only are marriages suffering, families are suffering, society is suffering. We're not functioning optimally, and really want to spread the word as much as possible to help people.
Now, one final question, and this will sort of segue when we'll have you on the second segment talking about the 5-step action plan to saving your marriage. But so far we've been talking about when a relationship is already in trouble and how Imago therapy can help. Does Imago therapy have any suggestions or guides in terms of preventing problems in the first place so couples aren't having this lack of connection, reaching conflict, and then needing to sort of solve it?
So you're asking whether there's suggestions in Imago how to prevent a couple from getting into a place of crisis, meaning...
Exactly.
Are you referring specifically to premarital work or just general preventative work?
Let's say both. Premarital work or just, again, it's best to start earlier rather than later before a couple's married, but before things get too bad, are there any ideas, guidelines for how to prevent problems in the first place?
Well, I think part of it is, I think one of the big problems especially that start the problems in a relationship is really two things I see with the young couples, which I think if they had a better understanding we could prevent. One of them is just the lack of skills, and that's something that they could easily learn in the sessions because they're learning how to communicate with each other in a different way. But besides the skills is realistic expectations, I think, or unrealistic expectations for that matter. I think that we expect that we fall in love, so to speak, with the person, and we realize we think they're the one for us, and then we get married and things change, and we think we made a wrong choice. And now it's kind of what society, we think, we can throw away marriage like some cheating. But really, once we understand the purpose of the conflict and the purpose of why we have that intense connection, which this is what Imago addresses. Imago basically posits that we start off in the romantic phase, that they call it nature's anesthesia, but I refer to it as Hashem's anesthesia, that God brings us together with this person, and if we were able to see all the problems that they have, we'd never get married. So we're on cloud nine, we overlook the negativity, then we get married, and then you have the power struggle. And most couples are in that power struggle. So if we could realize that this is a normal way of relationship, it would take a lot of the stress in a relationship. We could realize that this is expected, there's a reason for this, and if we can work through it, we can actually create a better relationship. So just to shift the perspective, I think would help a lot of couples from going down that slippery slope until they wind up in the deep abyss of conflicts and problems in their relationship. So just having an idea about how relationships work and the purpose of relationships, besides just the tools which we've discussed already, are essential for young couples, premarital, even newly married, to prepare themselves.
Rabbi Slatkin, I want to thank you for joining us on the Jewish Home and Family Show. Again, stick around for segment 2, where we will continue to talk to Rabbi Slatkin about his 5-step action plan to save your marriage. You can visit the Rabbi at therelationshiprabbi.com, therelationshiprabbi.com.
And now it's time for Relationship Skills.
You like potato, and I like patata. You like tomato, and I like tomato. Potato, patata, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off.
How to improve your relationship with your spouse.
Continuing with Dr. Heitler's The Power of Two, using climate control in your relationship. How would you describe the climate in your household? As a couple, you may mostly feel comfortably warm towards each other, mainly cold, or sometimes stormy. Unlike the weather outside your windows, the climate within your marriage, like the temperature in your living room, can be controlled. One of the great benefits of the modern age is this ability to keep our homes warm in winter and cool in the summer. Similarly, with contemporary understanding of emotions, whatever the stresses and tensions in your world, you and your partner still can determine the climate within your marriage. The climate between the two of you does, of course, become more difficult to control when the conditions of your life are stressful. Relaxing together out in the sunshine on a warm summer day, most couples will find themselves in a mellow mood. But life is not always sunny. Cooking dinner after an exhausting day with crying children when one of you is annoyed that the other has lost the checkbook and the other is upset over demeaning treatment at work. These are turbulent weather conditions. They pose serious challenges. Throughout either calm or troubling conditions, however, you can largely control your turbulence as a couple by using climate controls, such as monitor for heat and speed, use word patrol, as the pace picks up, pause, plan exit and re-entry routines, monitor for fatigue, hunger, illness, and overload. All of these principles are based on the reality that high-intensity debate does not create an environment conducive to talking about sensitive personal matters. To verbalize deeply felt concerns and feel safe expressing hurt, anxious, sad, or frustrated feelings, quiet talking is essential.
Pharaoh of Egypt, you have not yet obeyed the Lord. Let my people go.
You're listening to Israel National Radio.
We're on a mission from God.
Every Tuesday on Israel National Radio, the Temple Institute's Temple Talk with Yitzchak Ruvain
and Rabbi Chaim Richman.
It's about Jews.
It's about Parshat HaShavua.
It's about non-Jews.
It's about the world.
It's about our relationship to the divine presence. It's about the Holy Temple. It's about the rectification of all humanity. 3 p.m. Israel time.
8 a.m. Eastern Standard
Temple
Time.
Talk. It's everything you need to know about the Holy Temple and the Temple Mount. Every Tuesday on Israel National Radio.
Are your kids on the warpath? Battle plan. Parenting in a nutshell. Techniques for effective parenting.
Continuing with Positive Parenting, Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson. My child doesn't listen to me. When I ask her to do things, she ignores me until I get angry and yell or threaten. Lectures don't seem to help. It would be easier to do things myself, but I know that would not teach her responsibility. Many parents unintentionally teach their children to be parent deaf. This disease strikes many children early in life, especially when parents scream, yell, or lecture them while they're trying to explore their worlds and develop their sense of autonomy. Don't worry, it's not terminal. Hope is in sight if you learn to act more and talk less. If your child doesn't hear anything you say, or if you find yourself repeating things over and over, she may already have tuned you out. Instead of looking for the causes of this problem or deciding it's just a stage, it's better to look at your behavior for what you may unconsciously be doing to create the problem. Here are some suggestions. If you want your kids to listen more, it's important to use fewer words. Say what you mean as succinctly as possible, and then follow through with actions. Use one word to communicate what needs to be done. Lawn, dishes, bathroom, laundry. Be sure you have eye contact and a firm and loving expression on your face. Or if one word won't work, you can use 10 words or less. It's time to learn to do your own laundry. Call if you plan to stay at your friend's late. You can even use nonverbal signals. Point at what needs to be done. Smile, but don't say a word. Use your sense of humor. Here comes the tickle monster to get children who don't listen. A sense of humor is a great way to diffuse what could turn into a tense situation, unnecessarily so. Use action. Take the child by the hand and lead her kindly and firmly to the task that needs to be done. Another idea is writing a note. That might get your child's attention more than talking. Leave sticky notes around the house with reminders of what needs to be done. Children listen carefully when you whisper, so they have to listen in order to hear you. Try it. Ask children to summarize or paraphrase what they're hearing you say to teach listening skills. Give your child a choice that requires his help and attention. What is the first thing we should do now? Do you want to leave in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Helps the child feel like they have some sense of control in the situation. Now again, planning ahead to prevent future problems is always key and important. So if you're screaming, yelling, or lecturing, stop. All of these methods are disrespectful and encourage parent deafness. In self-defense, children usually rebel, actively by being disrespectful to you, or passively by just tuning you out. Children know when you mean it and when you don't, so don't say anything unless you mean it and can say it respectfully. Then follow through with dignity and respect, and usually without words. Model respectful listening. Children will listen to you when they feel that you listen to them. That's how they actually learn how to listen. If we listen to them, that's how they learn how to listen in general in life. We often wonder why children don't listen without realizing that we don't give them an example of what real listening is all about. Explain to your children that conversation is an art of give and take, back and forth, and not an attempt to make someone do what you want. Invite listening by asking curiosity questions instead of lecturing. Ask if your kids are willing to listen before you give them information. I have some important information about that. Would you like to hear it? They feel respected because they have a choice. If they agree to listen, they usually will. If they don't agree and you lecture anyway, you might as well be talking to the wall. Finally, have regular family meetings where all members, including parents, listen to each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect, where blame is out of the problem solving and listening skills are in. The best way for your children to learn how to listen is for you to be a good example of listening to them. I'd like to welcome back Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, the relationship rabbi, to the Jewish Home and Family Show. During this segment, we're going to focus on Rabbi Slatkin's book, Is My Marriage Over? The 5-Step Action Plan to Saving Your Marriage. Welcome back, Rabbi Slatkin, and if you can start by giving us an overview about what this 5-step action plan is all that would be great for our listeners.
So the 5-step action plan is really a way for couples who are couples that are in crisis, and even couples that are not necessarily in crisis but are experiencing some discomfort in their relationship, have learned some of the most effective ideas that I found working with couples to really get their marriage on the right direction, either to save it or to make things go smoother. It's especially good for couples in crisis because I really kind of studied my work with clients. Which clients have been most successful, and if the clients were not successful, what were the reasons that were getting in the way? So it's 5 steps. As I mentioned in the book, they do not necessarily need to be taken in order. Some of the steps alone can be helpful, but you can get the most out of it by combining them all together. And would you like me to explain what the steps are right now, or do you have a specific?
Yeah, if you could just give us an overview of what those 5 steps are. And again, I want to specify to everyone, this is just an overview. There's a whole book on this action plan. But just to get an understanding of where Rabbi Slatkin and the book is going, I encourage you, again, this one is also free for download and can also be purchased. But if you can give us an overview so we can get a feel for what it is you're talking about, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, sure. So I'll say the 5 steps and I'll explain each one briefly. The 5 steps are commit, feel your exit, detox your marriage, acknowledge the other, and love infusion. The way that I do this is, if you're viewing marriage in crisis, I like to think about, I mentioned at the beginning of the book, after 9/11, there was such chemical attacks in America, and we were looking to go to the store to buy things to make a safe room. And I was thinking about that in a relationship and how we can really prevent all the toxicity that's out there and really create a safe room in our relationship to protect yourself and to really save the relationship. So the first step is committing, and that means to really commit to the relationship, to realize that you want to make it work, to stop thinking about how somebody else might be better, how I made the wrong choice. That line of reasoning makes it very hard for couples to succeed. So even if they're doing all the great relational work, learning how to improve the relationship, if they're not fully there, if they really don't want to be there, if they've already checked out emotionally, it's going to be challenging to get them to come back together.
Now, a question I have also coming from the marital therapy background, there's all sorts of statistics about how marital therapy oftentimes isn't helpful. And one of the things that I've also personally found is oftentimes you'll have a couple that will come and say, okay, let's, get some therapy before we completely decide to end this relationship. And what I start to notice as a therapist is that one person seems to be committed, and as you said, the other person's already checked out. They're not really interested. They're just sort of officially going through the ropes so they can say, we tried everything. Even marital therapy didn't help us, so now we can officially end this relationship. What do you do when you have a couple like that, where you have one who is more willing to commit and another half of the couple that just is pretty much checked out? Is there hope for that kind of couple?
There is. I believe there's hope for every couple, and if they're willing to, it's going to take a lot longer, though. If someone's unwilling, it's going to take a lot longer for the work to really penetrate the heart so that they can really be open. I think ultimately we want to connect to our spouse, even if we're extremely hurt. So I think there is hope, but it's a lot harder to work where one person is out the door. And I think that we have to really know, it's hard to know for sure if one person really is not committed at all. Because what might look like it is just feeling unsafe. And if we can get them to feel safe and not threatened, that could be that they'll be willing to get back into the process and try to work on being in a relationship. So there's always hope, but it's much harder when one person is, checked out.
Well, I think just knowing that there's always hope is probably very helpful for any couples that might be listening that are in this relationship situation. So that's the first step, is to commit.
The fact that they're showing up for therapy, I think it says something about, unless they're just going through the motions.
That's right. And how about the second step? What does that entail?
The second step is feel your exit. Then, just like feeling making that closed room, it's feeling all the energy leaks in a relationship. What happens when we're in pain and we don't necessarily know how to articulate to our spouse? So instead of articulating to our spouse, we find other ways to pacify ourselves. So that could be workaholism. It can be as fatal as alcohol and drug abuse and infidelity, but it can be as more benign, like workaholism, or even super parent, watching TV, Facebook. They're all ways for us to kind of exit out of the relationship and find something to do with our time and with our hurt without actually engaging in the relationship with our spouse. And that feeling the exit means to acknowledge what we're doing to avoid being in a relationship and to do our best to at least limit the time that the overtime that we're expanding in these actual activities. So obviously I'm not saying that you shouldn't exercise, but if you notice yourself exercising to avoid your spouse, it's something to be aware of and to think about how you can do that differently.
Do you find it common that, especially when there's children involved, that one of the spouses will just get so involved with the kids as their form of exit so that they can sort of avoid the spousal relationship?
Yes, it's extremely common. It's a very easy way because we want, we naturally as parents want to care about our kids, and sometimes they can go overboard until there's really no spousal relationship there.
So that's a danger to definitely be aware of. How about step number 3, if you could elaborate on that one?
Sure. Step number 3 is detox your marriage, and even if you feel the room, if you have toxins coming in, it's a problem. So detoxing means no blaming, no shaming, no negativity. Obviously, it's a hard thing to do. Harville Hendricks, he says that his wife is married over 20 years, maybe 25 years by now. And basically, they've eliminated all shame, blame, and negativity in a relationship. Now, that's hard to believe. There are other people who said they've done it as well. If we can eliminate some of the toxic comments, criticism, the verbal abuse, of course, it goes without saying any other type of abuse is completely unacceptable, but even verbal abuse, which sometimes people think we give it a pass, it's really harmful to the relationship, and it really tears apart the connection and the trust that we have for each other. So working on our anger, working on the way we talking in a respectful way, and instead of blaming, taking responsibility. So using I statements, when you do that, I feel, as opposed to you're a horrible person, you're a jerk. Really trying to understand what's beneath that frustration that we have with our spouse. What do we want? Ask for what you want as opposed to complaining about what's not going right. And that will be much more effective in terms of understanding what you really want in your relationship.
That's a powerful step number 3. And how about step number 4?
Step number 4 is acknowledging the other, and this is really a lot of what we do when I do with couples with the Imago process and the Imago dialogue process, where we really learn how to make space for another person in a relationship, to realize that it's possible for both people to have a valid opinion and a valid perspective. It's a very hard thing to do, but it makes a huge difference. So in this chapter, we talk about how to create a proper environment so the other person is ready and available to talk. Now, we like to dump on ourselves sometimes, but thinking about the goal, what do I want? I want to connect, or I want something from my spouse, so if I hurt them, that's not going to get me the desired result. So making sure it's a good time to talk, and we talk about in there, to talk or inviting them to talk. Making sure they're ready to hear what you have to say, because sometimes when we hear things that ruffle our feathers, it's very difficult for us not to react. And then learning how to really cross the bridge into the other person's world and hear what you have to say without reacting. I find this to be one of the hardest things to do, but I think it's the most powerful. It's the most powerful thing that an individual can do, and it's not just in a relationship with your spouse, but in any relationship. We get so locked up in the different opinions that we have, and why we're right and the other person's wrong. And instead of focusing on being right or wrong, focusing on this is my perspective and this is their perspective, and I can appreciate that and understand them better. And usually when we can acknowledge the other, we'll have more compassion for their story, we'll understand why they're doing what they're doing in their relationship, and they'll be able to make a conscious choice to change because they understand where it's coming from, and we'll be able to be more sensitive to them and to their triggers.
And that's also building the safety in the relationship too. When you feel like instead of
exactly.
sort of you're not going to be received with criticism and barbs, but you're going to be acknowledged and respected for where you're coming from, even if there isn't agreement.
Exactly.
And the final step?
That's that structure. The final step is love infusion, and this is really the positive aspect, which I think is sometimes we forget when we're dealing with counseling. We want to help couples and deal with all the negativity, but sometimes things are so negative that I found even more recently with some couples that try to avoid even talking about frustrations and issues they have with each other because it just goes down a slippery slope until we get to negativity. So focusing on creating positivity. So one of that is sharing with each other appreciation. Really taking time, even on a daily basis, to tell your spouse what you appreciate about them. So many couples tell me that they are feeling unappreciated, and having that verbal appreciation is important. Another thing is date night, and that's making a set time to go out. Even though it sounds a little bit boring, but we know that we gather 3 times a day. We have set time for prayer, we have set times for co-study, and these are all show priority that this relationship is a priority. Our spiritual relationship is a priority. So too in a marriage, we want to show that our spouse is a priority. We can spend so much time with each other, but we could be like ships passing in the night, or helping out our kids. We don't actually have quality time where we can really connect with each other. And making a set time going out is extremely important. It's very helpful for couples.
So it's not just about putting out fires, but it's also about building a relationship, a healthy, balanced, loving relationship.
Right, and sometimes a little bit of that light can push away a lot of the darkness in a relationship. But even just focusing on bringing positivity, acknowledging each other, having a good time with each other. Now, we're not saying to ignore the issues, but sometimes a take-more approach is actually much more effective than a stronger approach.
Now, even from your overview of the 5-step action plan, each step seems to be so complex, so multifaceted. How do you know where to start with the couple?
Well, when a couple, this book, I have couples read this book and they actually do it on their own, and they told me they've been able to make huge transformations in their marriage just by reading the book and doing the exercises in the book. And most couples try to start from the beginning, and I think it's important, but even if a couple feels like, you know what, I'm not really sure how committed I am to my spouse, don't stop there. Just keep going through, see what you can do. If you just focus on chapter 5, on the side of love infusion, and you just focus on being really positive and doing caring things for yourself and going out, that can make a shift in a relationship. If you focus on feeling your exit, that can make a shift. So I think that every person who reads the book will need to decide for themselves where they're ready and able to begin. It's great if you can go step by step, but as I write in the introduction, wherever you start is a good place.
And how did you come up with these 5 steps? I mean, again, each step includes many different sub-steps, but how did it come down to these 5 as opposed to anything else when you're talking about saving a marriage?
Well, I reflected upon my work with clients, and I saw situations where, in really difficult situations, where they were able to save their relationship. I started thinking about what are the things that they did. So, I know at least some of them that we were doing in the sessions, acknowledging the other. But I know that I'm working on the detoxing. But I know some of the other elements that I've realized that if we had some, but didn't have all of them, that didn't necessarily go successfully. So I realized that there's certain things that were really necessary. What were the ingredients that made all these couples have a successful relationship? And that's how I came up with these 5. Now, there could be more. I always feel that whatever approach works for people, that's great. I'm not assessing that this is the only way to go. This is just what I found in my experience to work, and that's why I created these 5 steps. And it's also much easier. It's more user-friendly to break it down to 5 steps and to make it complicated. People can go through the book step by step and really feel like they're making progress.
Now, again, this book was written to save marriages that are in distress. Are there any couples that you feel that you can't help?
So, I really feel that if a couple wants to be involved in the process, I can help them. As I said, if someone is not committed, then I feel that it's pretty difficult. And I'm not saying to judge them and say, well, you're not really committed to this relationship. But, for example, if somebody is planning on if somebody's married and they're seeing somebody else, and they're planning on their life after they end this relationship. So they can come to counseling, and it's going to be very challenging to get them to save their relationship if their mind and heart are elsewhere.
So then that first step of commitment is really so central to saving a marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the prerequisite. I think that once you have that, look, there are even cases where people are emotionally attached to someone else. If they're committed to coming, eventually it can sink in. But it's going to take a lot longer, and those couples are not going to want to spend the time working on a relationship that they don't, at least on some level, don't want to save.
And again, this book is My Marriage Over, the 5-Step Action Plan to Saving Your Marriage is available for free download from your website, therelationshiprabbi.com. It can also be purchased, is that right?
Yeah, it can also be purchased on Amazon.com. If you just search for the title, you'll be able to find it. And you can get a hard copy that way.
Okay, and again, Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, the Relationship Rabbi, is available locally in Baltimore and online internationally for counseling. He offers workshops, and you can get more information about Rabbi Slatkin and his books at the website, therelationshiprabbi.com, therelationshiprabbi.com. Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, I'd like to thank you again for joining us on the Jewish Home and Family Show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
עבדו את השם בשמחה, בואו לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם בשמחה, בואו לפניו. בואו, עבדו את השם בשמחה, בואו לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם בשמחה, בואו לפניו.
Here's a thought to ponder. A great marriage is not when the perfect couple comes together. It is when an imperfect couple learns to enjoy their differences. Once again, I want to thank you for joining the Jewish Home and Family Show. Please send emails, questions, comments to jewishhomeshow@gmail.com. That's jewishhomeshow@gmail.com.
On Israel National Radio, this is News and Jews. I'm Robert Cate. Barack Obama told conservative rabbis that he probably knows more about Judaism than any other president. Oh, yeah? Does he know more than the president of my shul? Can Barack Obama tell me what hall the Kiddush is going to be in? I don't think so. Can he tell me who just got engaged? I don't think so. Do we know for sure that even previous presidents like Ronald Reagan didn't speak Hebrew? Well, ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Or Bill Clinton. I could not have had anything with that woman. I was on my side of the mechitza. Sure, President Clinton could have been that traditional and known all about that. Or how about W, doing hatikva? Kol od beleva pnima nefesh Yehudi homiya. Or how about W being the president of my shul? There's going to be a kiddush inside the Tesler Hall. Guests of the Finkelsteins invite their friends and family to join them and raise a glass and say l'chaim. How could President Obama say that he knew the most about Judaism that way? Has he never heard President Bill Clinton do Friday night kiddush? Yom HaShishi v'achlu shema v'aretz chol tzva'am. And how about Abe Lincoln? Big black hat, beard, maybe Abe the Chassid? This was on Israel National Radio, News and Jews. I'm Robert King.
ערוץ 6